Okay, so Dan, we got the recording going. Looks
Yes.
like. Okay, I do see that. All right. This is the fire weather briefing for Washington and Northern Idaho for August 25, 2025. I am Brent here in Seattle, and we have Dan in Spokane. Before we get going, we have this disclosure. This meeting is being recorded. By joining and participating in this session, consent is being given to the recording. Please keep the cameras off per NOAA's Privacy Act statement. Right, so current conditions, we have a number of things going on. Over the Pacific Northwest, we're under high pressure, as we have been for several days with a thermal trough. There is monsoon moisture that's coming up, heading this way and getting into the area over the next few days. There's also this low pressure here that's forecast to fill in a little bit, weaken, and kind of come on shore, which could flatten some of the ridge out here in the west, which could change how that moisture flows up in this direction. But we also have a low pressure in the Gulf of Alaska that's forecast to come down, which will approaching the coast, which would tend to bump up the ridge over us as again, or in conjunction some way with all these different flow patterns going on. So how that all plays together is going to influence our conditions going forward and chances of thunderstorm, how hot and dry it's going to be, that sort of thing. So overnight, maximum relative humidities have been pretty poor in their recoveries. On the west side, poor to maybe moderate, at least in the mountains. Of course, it's been excellent in the lowlands. On the east side, it's much drier. Some very poor conditions in the 20% range, especially in the mountains and along the east side of the Cascades. Dan, is there anything specific you wanted to point out in addition to that?
Yeah. The worst recoveries are on the east side are generally above 3,000 feet. So that'll kind of continue through tonight. And then as we get into Tuesday night, we'll have increasing atmospheric moisture. So our recoveries will start to improve. That's all.
Okay. All right, so the summary for the week ahead on Western Washington, we still have one more day of hot, dry, and unstable. We do have beginnings of the slight chance of thunderstorms. This is mainly over our Cascades area, not infecting the western part of our area over the Olympics and lowlands as much. That improves slightly as we sort of ease out of it. We have continued elevated concerns with hot and unstable, but the relative humidity with more onshore flow and more influence off the ocean will slowly raise the relative humidities over the next few days through the rest of the week, actually. So Wednesday stays a little bit warm. But Tuesday and Wednesday do increase the chances of thunderstorms for our area. And then we stay more seasonally cooler, but continue the chance of showers through most of the rest of the week until about Sunday. All right, so Dan, I'm going to take the east side in Idaho.
Yeah. So today, kind of the same deal for Eastern Washington. We're continuing our hot, dry, and unstable conditions with like a very slight chance of thunderstorms kind of near the Cascade Crest, like 5 to 10% chance. And then tomorrow, those hot, unstable conditions kind of continue, but with increasing atmospheric moisture, kind of take away the dry part. But we're still keeping it as critical with the chance of thunderstorms being a little bit higher tomorrow. And then as we get into Wednesday and Thursday, we're looking at a lot more cloud cover, so our like temperatures and RHs will be moderated a lot more, and we're a little bit less concerned for those days, but still elevated fire weather conditions. But then as we get into like Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, we're looking a little bit more like seasonal, just kind of like the west side too, with a little bit slight chance of thunderstorms Friday. Probably nothing too noteworthy, especially with a lot better humidity recoveries at night. And then as we get into the weekend, just kind of a showery look, kind of isolated showers. That's all.
Okay, so for today, we still have hot, dry, and stable conditions. Have you seen and what we have out? And that's on both sides. By Tuesday, as we talked about, it's just on the east side. So we do have elevated conditions through kind of the east side of the Olympic Peninsula down through our southwest side. And then we continue our red flag mornings for the northern and southern Washington Cascade fire weather zones. And that also continues for the east side, northern Washington Cascades, and some elevated a little bit further into the foothills and below. So conditions will remain with high temperatures in the 80s and 90s, except near 100 degrees on the east slope valleys of the Cascades. Minimum RHs of 15 to 35%, and a little bit of wind with east to northeast 5 to 15 miles per hour. But we do have that in as the hot and dry kind of start to slowly ease. We have the increasing instability and chances of thunderstorms for Monday. And the fuels will continue to be dry and even drier as these conditions go on for a few more days. All right, we have some slides here to kind of point out the probability of thunderstorms through the next several days. I know, Dan, did you want to lead that, or I can take
Yeah,
it?
I could talk about it. So today, mainly the chances over the Cascades, just a low end 5 to 10% chance. There's a lot of atmospheric instability present, but the big question is, can a storm go up in that environment? There's not a lot of support for that, so that's kind of why it's looking like a 5 to 10% chance today. And
All
then
right,
as we get in, oh, do you want me to keep going?
Yeah, yep.
Okay. So for Tuesday, our chances look higher in the Cascades, 10 to 20% chance, main hours between like 2 and 8 p.m. But then also we have kind of a secondary target for thunderstorms there in the southeast Washington and kind of the southern Idaho panhandle there, another area of like 10 to 20% chance of thunderstorms. And then as we get into Wednesday, there's the thunderstorm chances are in the Cascades are kind of more limited to north of Interstate 90 for the most part, for like the 10 to 20% chances. And then another day of potential thunderstorms in the southeast, like 10 to 20% chance. What this picture isn't showing, and I was kind of looking at this potential this morning, was in the Columbia Basin area, kind of in the morning, seeing some potential for some thunderstorm development. So we'll kind of keep a close eye on that. If that was the case, though, our atmosphere will be pretty moist at that point, so the fire concerns won't be too high. And then here we have into Thursday, thunderstorm chances kind of become a little bit more broad in the Cascades and Northeast Washington, much of the Idaho Panhandle, and even a little bit of portion of Southeast Washington there, like a 15 to 30% chance.
All right. So, along with the red flag warnings and even fire weather watch, we also have heat advisories over much of the area for Western Washington's kind of along the Puget Sound and west, and then extreme heat warnings for the foothills and mountains. And that extends obviously across much of the Cascades and down into much of uh, the eastern and central part of Washington. And is there anything more specific you wanted to talk to on this one?
I don't think so. That's enough, I think.
Okay. All right. So let's go to this is pretty much the same thing, shows the hazards, but also we have some air quality issues with some of the ongoing fires that we have. So going to the weather, just to show you some numbers that we're talking about here for day one, max temperatures, we're still seeing the 80s to mid 90s in some of the elevated terrain and some of the southwest on the west side, and 90s to 100 and slightly above that through much of eastern Washington and northern Idaho in the upper 90s, with min RHs one more day of getting in the 20-30% on the west side, but in the teens and 20s for much of eastern Washington and northern Idaho. And then day two, we're starting to come down just a few degrees, but still fairly warm. It's on both sides still with minimum RHs. You can see now on the west side that marine influence has really picked things up as we only isolate areas that might get as low as 30 or below, but still well into the teens and some low 20% range on the east side as well. As we talked about the thunderstorms, I did want to look at one other thing with the QPF. Most of the, I don't know, we're still trying to dig into how much moisture might come out of these. And they're not super wet, but there is some high atmospheric moisture coming in, potentially to tap into. But so far, the amounts have been 100th to a 10th, somewhere in that range. This is the 72 hours for the first 3 days. And again, it's showing just 100th to a 10th and along the Cascades, both sides of the Cascades. But then as you saw those higher potentials that Dan talked about and the more moisture kind of in the southeast, then those amounts go quite a bit up to over an inch to inch and a half in some of the southern parts of those locations. So let's go to specific trends. And I'm going to start off, look at both kind of the Olympic Peninsula where things are moderating first. This is Jefferson Creek over near the Bear Gulch fire. And one thing we have seen is as with the heat and the dryness that's been over there, as the RHs are dropping during the day, we also have the upslope and up valley winds that start picking up, and those especially in that location of the peninsula of the Olympics can start drawing up the marine air influence, which has a higher relative humidity, and that can actually start to lower or raise the RHs in the late afternoon into the evening rather than continuing to drop. So you have this kind of a low point and then it goes back up. And then sometimes as the downslope, down valley winds go, it draws it back into the kind of the upper elevation air, which is very dry. And sometimes we've seen the RHs drop into the teens, like between midnight and 3 o'clock. And so we see a little bit of that bouncing around still here, that the models have a hard time catching that. But after today, that we pretty much have a lot higher relative humidities over there on the eastern, well, west side, but up in the Cascades, we still see a couple days of pretty low minimum RHs through the afternoons, and then we see that recovering as to the overnight recoveries get better, and even the minimum RHs are much more moderate, not super wet, but at least out of the critical and even elevated conditions. And along with that, we can see some of the potential for precipitation starting really not till tomorrow for us. We saw very slight chances for the thunderstorms, but about 25% each of the days as we have chances for thunderstorms in the afternoon and evening. Then moving over to eastern Washington, we'll look at Dry Creek first. So Dan?
Yeah. So for Dry Creek, kind of the main story is the hottest temperatures are going to be today and tomorrow in the 90s, and then we start to decrease into the 80s and even the 70s kind of by the late week. Our humidity recoveries in the morning will remain poor for the next few mornings, couple mornings here. This is the first one's Monday morning. In the 30% ish range. This forecast is a little overdone on those, just based off what we were seeing this morning. And then our afternoon relative humidities the next few days here will be in the upper teens to low 20s. But then as we get that increased atmospheric moisture, our humidity recoveries like Thursday morning start to look a lot better in the 60s. And then our afternoon RHs will be in the 30s. And as far as wind speeds, this Dry Creek one's in a decent amount of terrain. So just terrain driven flow kind of for the next couple days. But then as we get into like Wednesday evening, we kind of start to go into this prevailing like west northwest flow kind of on the east slopes of the Cascades. And the precipitation chances similar there to the Cascades, the far north Cascades there, with increased chances kind of like Tuesday through like Thursday afternoon, and then kind of remaining a little bit elevated as we go into the weekend, like 20% chances for showers. That's it for that one. And for North Idaho, it shows Hoodoo here. Pretty hot temperatures. This station's a little lower, so the temperatures there are showing the upper 90s, and then they kind of back off into the mid 80s or so by Thursday, kind of sticking in that general area. We'll have the driest relative humidities the next few afternoons in the teens. Kind of same story as Washington, with better humidity recoveries overnight coming like by Thursday, and RH is kind of in the mid 20s to 30s by Friday, and very light winds in North Idaho. Not expecting any significant winds or anything. I think that's all.
All right, so looking a little further out, this will be basically the first week of September. We have greater odds of above normal temperatures in that time frame, but also greater odds for above normal precipitation across all of Washington and northern Idaho for that week, and that's, I'm sure, reflecting in the continued influence of maybe some of these lows off the coast that may come into the area in that time frame as we go forward, and some thunderstorm chances later. That will be the end of our discussion, and we will close off the recording and open it up for any questions.